Well, we're in the shop again for like the 5th time tonight, but that's okay. We are going to do an epoxy pour. I do a lot of them. I realized I haven't got any videos of how I do epoxy pours, so here you go. Before we jump into this late night project, there's a couple things you gotta know that are super crucial when pouring epoxy. One, whatever you're gonna pour, make sure you have at least 2 coats of oil-based poly on it, at least. There's tiny little pores in the wood, and if you don't seal those up, you'll get little microscopic air bubbles that you can actually see, and they're really annoying because sometimes you can't get rid of them. 2, these little trowels here, they're plastic, they're cheap, they have 1/8" teeth. You can get them at Menards for $2. Use those, because if you forget about them or don't clean them, you can toss them away. And last but not least, but the most important, when you are doing late night pours like this, make sure you got the loafers on. Because if you drip on those, it's not a real big deal. So we're getting to the point where we're gonna get ready to start pouring this thing. I should probably mention that there is a little thing called gravity, okay? And if we aren't sitting perfectly level, whatever you pour on here is gonna drip to the lowest point, naturally, right? That would be common sense. However, there's not a lot of common sense left in the world, so we're just gonna touch on every topic. I went ahead and leveled this thing to save you guys some pain from having to watch me do that. So we're gonna skip that process. I am gonna be using Envirotech Light Hardener. I picked it up at a local hardware store one day because I ran out of epoxy and I didn't have time to wait for my Pro Marine because I like to use that. And this stuff, it hardens really hard. It pours on thick. I like it, so that's what I'm going to use. Also, I have these real fancy mixing buckets. Let me show you. Like this. They have your measurements on the sides. However, that's pretty dirty and disgusting. I might be able to use it. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill up some Dixie cups for this pour because it's not really going to take that much. You can calculate out the surface area and know exactly how many ounces you use. That's over my pay scale. I'm just good at judging, so if you're one of those people that needs to measure it out, have the square footage, board foot, whatever, more power to you. Me, I'm gonna fill up 2 of these Dixie cups, one with hardener, one with resin, and I'm assuming that's probably gonna be just enough. And we're gonna find out here real shortly. But I'm gonna fill up 2 of these, and then I'm gonna find something clean to mix it in. I don't think I'm gonna do that. I'll find something in the shop, but I'll show you how this is done. So I did end up finding something a little bit cleaner. It is an old windshield washer jug. I wouldn't really recommend using stuff that had other chemicals in it, but for this situation, it's gonna be fine. This is our first coat. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take some of our resin, and I'm using these Dixie cups because they have lines, so I can use those to measure. So I'm gonna come up, actually, I'm gonna come right up to this top lip. See if you can see that. Well, it doesn't matter if you can see it or not. Whoa, you know what? I'm not gonna come up that high. That's gonna be way too much. So I'm gonna fill up to that line. And you know what? That's probably even gonna be too much. But that's okay. Because I'd rather have a little too much than not enough. And I like to put the first coat on thick. You'd rather have too much than not enough. Because to have to mix in between a pour, it'd be fine, but if you don't have to do it, try not to. So now what I'm gonna do is take and dump these both right together. Oh yeah, this is gonna actually end up being about just perfect. So I've done enough of this where I can generally gauge how much I need just kind of by looking and guesstimating. So what you're gonna wanna do once you have them mixed in is your mixing stick, just kind of try to scoop out the cups and get the last little bit, because this is 1-to-1. So you wanna try to mix them as closely together as far as amounts goes as possible. And when this says mix for 6 minutes, you better mix for 6 minutes and 30 seconds, because it's very finicky stuff if you start kind of making your own rules with it. So I'm gonna get a stick, clean this up. We're gonna mix this for 5 minutes, and then we're gonna get pouring this on. I'll show you how I do it.
Depending on the brand of epoxy you're using, mixing time could be anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes.
So when you're mixing this stuff, you don't want to do it too vigorously because you'll create a lot of air bubbles in there. So what I like to do is just kind of make sure you're getting the sides really thoroughly, doing some figure 8 patterns. I guess if you want, a really good technique would be to just write cursive in there. You know, spell some words in cursive. That's another lost art. You can really do it however you want to, just as long as you mix it up thorough enough. And for how many minutes? 5 minutes or 6 minutes. Or I think some even say 7 minutes. But when you have little amounts like this, you don't have to get too crazy, too thorough, because after about 4 minutes of mixing, you can tell it gets pretty mixed in. It starts a little cloudy, and then as it really gets mixed, it becomes more clear. So that's another good indication that you've been mixing it properly. All right, once your time is up, you get ready to pour. So I'm right-handed, as you could probably tell. So I like to start on the right side of things. What I do, make sure it's cleaned off. And I just pour, kind of make a zigzag pattern. And then what I do is, I get a little pile going. I need just a little bit more to start. Yeah, that'll be good. I get a little pile going, and then I just work it back and forth. And I don't go all the way to the edge. Some people pour frame or build frames and everything. You don't have to when you're doing it this way, but I just get a little pile going, and then I work it back and forth. Kind of like when you wipe a kitchen table, you know, you go from one end to the other, and you don't pick it up. You just kind of keep on pushing it and working it. And I'm not going all the way to the edges, and you're gonna see why in just a second. You're probably seeing that my shop floor is full of drips. Well, those were from X pours that went wrong. And as a matter of fact, the drips that are underneath this table right now were from a buddy that came over and tried to do a pour, and well, it worked, but he didn't seal it up good enough, and well, it leaked all over my shop floor. Not a big deal. So you see how I got that nice big pile I'm pushing? I'm just gonna work that, come right to the edge and turn before it dumps off. You just work that big pile right across. And just keep pushing it the whole way. Takes a little bit to get used to, but you'll get good at it. I think. And some days I think that I could get better. Well, I could always get better, but you know what I mean. All right, I'm gonna finish this up. And then we're gonna come back and I'm gonna show you how to make this look pretty. So, do you see all those spots along the edge that I missed? Because I only went right up to it. What I do now, once I have all of the top on, all the way, I just take my hand and I just rub that edge, just like this. Because what happens is now, well, let's see if I can see it. When I will hit this with the torch, it'll thin out, run flat, and it won't sit there and drip over the edge the whole time. See how that's dripping? That's fine, because I got to come along my edge and wipe that with my hands. So I'll do this along the whole edge, get all my spots that are dry around the front and back sides. So you can see here, just rub it right in. And then once I get all my edges rubbed in, I'll come back and do my sides. That way, I don't have to pour a whole bunch on and just let it drip off the edges so that my floor looks like that. Like I said, that's all old stuff from an old pour. I save lots of epoxy, and I save myself on big cleanup. So there. The top is perfectly coated. I'm gonna do the sides quick and then we're gonna hit it with the torch. I should probably let you know that when you get your batch mixed up, you have about 20 minutes to get it applied before it starts getting sticky and starts to cure. So you gotta move kind of quick. So here's a knot, and from that angle you can see that this has seeped through that knot hole. Now more than likely there's a good chance I might not get those to stay full, but there's another little wormhole down here that I need to try to fill up. But I'm going to hit this area with the torch because I think you're going to be able to see the air bubbles kind of pop out of it. So I'm going to finish filling a couple little holes here. I'm going to try not to get my phone all full of epoxy, and hopefully I can do a good enough job of helping you guys see how this goes. So if you want to do a pour, you're like a seasoned vet the first time you do it. Before we get too far ahead, I just want you guys to see how satisfying this is. Maybe it's just me, but I love wiping epoxy on live edge slabs because it just is extremely satisfying for me. And the reason why I wipe it on with my hand like that is, again, then there's no drips. A lot of people will pour it, then you'll see drips. They'll dry and they'll dry as drips, so then you have to sand them down and then put a light coat on. This way, if you do it thin, you save epoxy, you don't drip all over your floor, and you don't have drips showing or visible on your live edge. It's nice and smooth. So I have my torch. I like to turn it up about that high and just run back and forth all the way down your slab. And I hope you can see that. I hope you can see the bubbles popping. But you can let the flame hit your epoxy. Just make sure you don't sit in one spot for too long or you will burn it. So I'm gonna grab my phone and see if I can do this with both hands so you can see how satisfying this aspect of it is also. See how they just pop real nice? It's hard to see on the phone, but let's see here. Let me see if I can find a good angle for you. Oh, there we go. Watch this. So I just back and forth, nice and easy. I let my flames hit my epoxy and it pops those bubbles nice. I'll work this the whole way down. I'll give it a second. I'll look it over and make sure that I got every inch of this slab covered in epoxy. And then I'll hit it one more quick time because sometimes the bubbles come back. However, if you poly it good enough, they might not. I know in like the knot holes, these little cracks and stuff, those you can't always seal up on the first time unless you put maybe like a clear silicone in there. But those are small enough, it's not gonna be a super huge deal. So I'm gonna hit this one last time and I'll take you through one more final overview after. All right, so if you get nice and flat, you can see if you've got it fully covered, and we do. So you'll see that there's some drips down here. If you still got a glove on, you can just, while they're still wet, wipe them like that. Smear them into the bottom. But if you miss them, not a big deal. Because what we'll do is we'll just sand them once it's cured. And that's another reason why I like to wipe it on with my hands, because there's less drips on the bottom we have to sand when it's over and done with. But like I said, that's not a super huge deal, but we're just being efficient. We're trying to eliminate as many steps as we can the first time. But there you have it. Tomorrow, we're gonna sand this all down, wipe it clean, and we're gonna put one more coat on, and it should be perfect and ready to go. We'll let that dry. If there's any drips on these edges, we'll sand them down, wipe it again, boom. Client can come and pick it up. Now that it's cured a little bit, what I'm doing is I'm just gonna rough up the surface with a little 220 grit sandpaper. Once I have the whole thing roughed up, I will wipe it down and get all the debris off from me sanding, and I will pour a new coat, which I'm going to do in the basement because the kids are riding around in the shop making dust. And this will be the final coat, so I can't have any bugs or any dust or anything landing on it. So I'm going to do it in a safe spot. So we're going to get rid of these little drips here quick to finish up this table build, and well, not necessarily build, but table pour. We're gonna sand these flat and flush. Obviously it's a little loud right now. I have a fan going to blow all this away from me so I don't inhale it, because I don't have a mask currently. I wrecked it with the silo projects. Actually, no, the pigeons did, because they crapped all over it because I left it over there, and I don't like that. But anyways, yeah, so I got a fan blowing, that's why it's loud. I'm just a poor woodworking guy, and I don't have all the fancy schmancy high quality sound system and camera equipment that big time YouTubers have, and it is what it is. But I'm gonna sand these down and we're gonna get done here. At this point, you're going to want to be as absolutely careful as possible that you don't hit the sides or the top, obviously, with your sander. Unfortunately, I'm speaking from experience, but what I do is I sand down as much as I can, but as little as possible, so that it's only smooth to the touch. I don't want to take any of that sealer off the bottom. This is a countertop, so at some point liquid will, I'm sure, be spilt. I want to make sure the bottom is still sealed and I didn't sand through that. Once I get everything sanded that I need sanded, what I do is I take the blower and I blow off any excess dust so that I can eliminate as much contact with the surface as possible, but it creates a static electricity, so it wants to stick. So you will have to wipe a little bit off. Just make sure your rag's clean and you're not pushing too hard. Once it's finished, you'll see it's literally perfect. I wish I could take a finished picture of this installed. However, the client's not putting it in until November and it's only August. So I hope this is a good enough finished product picture for you guys. If you've made it this far, I hope you consider subscribing to my channel, liking, sharing, and if you have any comments that would help my life out and move a little bit easier, go ahead and leave them. But again, thank you, and please consider subscribing and joining me on this not normal adventure.